our new world view. We call them heroes. For example, in the 16th century, Galileo insisted we could understand the world by observing it, rather than by deferring to faith in God. His observations put an end to the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. 100 years later, Isaac Newton destroyed the belief held in his time that the universe was static and stars were motionless. Then, at the beginning of our century, Albert Einstein showed that time passes at different rates according to how fast you're moving through space. Now, each one of these men had the genius as well as the courage to describe the world in radical new ways, and in so doing, they forever changed the way the rest of us see it. Now, meet physicist Stephen Hawking, who is taking us across another frontier. He is tackling science's most confounding puzzle. Where did our universe come from? How did it all begin?
I want to understand the universe, how it came into being, how it will evolve, and why it is the way it is.
At age 47, a professor at Cambridge University in England, Stephen Hawking has captured people's imagination around the world. Not only does he dare to ask questions many believe are unanswerable, but he has written a book about these confounding ideas that has become a worldwide bestseller. And he has accomplished all this while battling amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, a neurological disorder which has robbed him of the use of nearly his entire body, including his ability to speak.
What's Dad saying?
I was on New York Avenue.
I was on New York.
Okay, then I got an 8 right.
Stephen's specially designed computer program, which stores words and letters for him to choose among, and the voice synthesizer that speaks the sentences he composes, have made possible even a game of Monopoly with his youngest son, Timmy.
I will buy 9 houses.
Sure then.
This machine has been a great help. Before I had it, he could not understand me.
I didn't know his real voice, because when he started to feel ill, he didn't talk properly, so I didn't really get the tune of the voice. But I think that the voice he's got now, that suits him quite well.
Of all my children, he is probably the one most like me.
He usually beats me with chess, and I usually beat him at Monopoly, so we're both quite good at something.
The round-the-clock staff of nurses required to care for Stephen, and the 3 Hawking children, ages 10 to 22, contribute to a constant stream of household activity. This morning, for instance, Lucy Hawking is awaiting her father's reaction to the new car she and her mother have picked out.
Has it got a stereo?
That's what I was telling you about last night. It's got a radio. I've had lots of arguments with him, actually, I must admit. Lots of arguments when neither of us is willing to give ground. I think a lot of people don't realise just how stubborn he is, how much that once he gets an idea in his head, he will follow it through no matter what the consequences are, that he doesn't let a thing drop.
Stephen Hawking's legendary willpower has helped him travel a great distance in the 26 years since his disease was first diagnosed. He was in college then, and he was told he had only 2 years to live. He turned away from his studies and spent his days drinking.
He obviously was feeling very lost. The prognosis had been so shattering that it had destroyed a lot of his willpower.
But Hawking survived beyond the doctor's predictions. And then he met a young woman named Jane Wilde. Refusing despair, they married and had their first child, Robert.
It obviously gave Stephen a great new impetus, being responsible for this tiny creature as well. I think one of the things that Stephen determined was not to become a sort of professionally disabled person. And the idea was to put it in the background as much as possible, to give him a completely normal life.
One has to be grown up enough to realize that life is not fair. You just have to do the best you can in the situation you are in. I get embarrassed when people say I have enormous willpower and courage. It is not as if I had had a choice, and I had deliberately chosen a difficult path.
But when it came to his work, Hawking did choose a difficult path, tackling some of the most troubling questions in theoretical physics. The science of physics is the effort to find laws that describe how our world works. What keeps the planets orbiting around the sun? Why does time seem to go forward instead of backward? Physicists ask questions the rest of us take for granted. Hawking chose the ultimate question: what caused the universe?
We all need to know where we come from and what may happen in the future. Otherwise, life just seems pointless.
As a young PhD candidate, Hawking demonstrated his genius by asking and then answering the question, did the universe have a beginning? Was there actually a single moment in which everything began? Once Hawking proved there was a beginning, he asked his next question: what laws of science explained what happened then? But this question was considered impossible.
Current scientific theories about the origin of the universe say that at a point near the very beginning, all the known laws of science break down and form a sort of barrier to our understanding. At this point, some say we have to either accept not knowing or turn to God. Hawking says no.
Studying black holes will help to understand the beginning of the universe.
Black holes are the one phenomenon of nature that may have similarities to the beginning of the universe. They are areas in space with such extreme gravity that everything drawn into them goes to a single point. It's a similar point of powerfully concentrated gravity that may have caused the Big Bang explosion that formed our universe. The more Hawking understands the laws that apply to black holes, the greater his chances of discovering the laws that explain the beginning of time. To understand how Hawking looks for these laws, it helps to imagine a balloon inflating. The surface covered with points that represent stars and galaxies spreading apart as the universe expands. Hawking runs the clock backwards, deflating the balloon, in order to study the first milliseconds of time. It's there he expects to find the initial conditions that will help explain all the laws of the universe. Scientists like to call this quest the search for the theory of everything. And Stephen Hawking is considered a leading candidate to help find and apply it.
It is quite possible that we will find a complete unified theory by the end of the century. But it will take much of the fun out of theoretical physics. It will be like mountaineering after Everest has been climbed.
Hawking likes the challenge of scaling the highest mountain, and he spotted another peak to conquer. He set himself the task of communicating these ideas to the lay public.
I am very excited about the discoveries that have been made recently. I wanted to share that excitement with the general public.
Hawking spent 5 years writing A Brief History of Time, which stunned book publishers by selling over 2.5 million copies around the world, being translated into 20 languages. It won Hawking the Britannica Award for excellence in the dissemination of learning for the benefit of mankind.
In knowledge, you are called Einstein's successor, but in communicating knowledge, you have no peer.
Earlier this year, Stephen Hawking traveled to the United States to share his current investigations with the growing numbers of people who have read his book and want to meet him.
Because I'm one of Stephen's nurses, I'm preoccupied with trying to get him in as good shape as I can for what he's got to get through the day.
We start off with the schedule and we never stick to it.
People want to have interviews, they want him to read their papers, he wants them to visit their homes, he wants them to stop and talk. And he finds it difficult to say no. That's one of the wonderful things about him, that he doesn't say no.
I'm making a telescope.
Is the sky clear here?
In addition to meeting with students at Brown University, Hawking is scheduled to give a speech which is open to the general public.
I expect this is the first time you have been addressed by a real computer. It seems that particles can fall into black holes, which then evaporate and disappear from our region of the universe. The particles go off into baby universes, which branch off from our universe.
I think people maybe want to treat Stephen as a hero or a guru because he appears helpless and vulnerable, and yet he has such amazing intellectual powers and stamina and will not be defeated by anything. His mind can control his attitude. I think that's what it is.
It may also be that Hawking inspires us to ask the questions we've long ago forgotten.
Often it's only children who ask the big questions. Where did we come from and why? Perhaps many of us as adults have quit asking because we're resigned to the idea there may be no answers. One reason Stephen Hawking is popular with ordinary people, non-scientists, may be that he has reawakened hope that we can find answers. Many scientists are reluctant to make reference to God, as though theological ideas are in direct opposition to scientific ideas. And yet you, a scientist, have invoked not only the idea of God, but the mind of God.
It is difficult to discuss the beginning of the universe without mentioning the concept of God. My work on the origin of the universe is on the borderline between science and religion, but I try to stay this side of the border. It is quite possible that God acts in ways that cannot be described by scientific laws. But in that case, one would just have to go by personal belief.
While Stephen Hawking's work addresses the most profound questions of our existence, his own story is a reminder of the immense capacity of the human spirit.
I always think, oh, he's going to be all right because he's always pulled through everything that's ever happened to him. You can't help worrying about someone who's so frail. So I get quite worried when he goes away.
In a sense, we've always been living on the edge of the precipice. And eventually you put down roots to the edge of the precipice. And I think that's what we've done. And we've done it really by not looking into the future, but looking in other directions around us.
Remarkable. I would think this would be such a difficult interview to do. First of all, getting used to his way of talking, and secondly, understanding what he was talking about. And I understand that he wanted to do the interview particularly with you because you do, in a sense, understand the language.
He knows I'm really interested in the subject, and he kind of came alive that way. You know, one thing that impressed me was, I know a lot of his popular visibility may come because of his heroic dealing with his physical condition. But I think the acknowledgement of his intellectual prowess is really mostly because he has about the sharpest mind since Einstein. A remarkable man.
Can you forget when you're with him how much difficulty he has?
In a short time, he puts you at ease, really, because at first it's kind of embarrassing, but very quickly you realize that he makes no concessions to his illness, as his wife said, and it's just not clobbering his quality of living. It's remarkable to see.
It must have been an extraordinary experience for you.
It was indeed.